Setting boundaries is something that we hear all the time. But when it comes to actually setting boundaries, a lot of us just want to throw in the towel. I mean, it feels pretty harsh to put boundaries in place for the people that we love or even ourselves. It feels overwhelming because maybe we've never seen how boundaries are set or what a successful boundary looks like. But the reality is, if we don't set boundaries, there are consequences not only for us, but for the other people that we love. Sometimes we believe we're setting boundaries when we're actually not. This could be like oversharing or saying yes when we actually mean no, or staying in unhealthy or toxic relationships. But because we're made to believe that somehow if we put ourselves first, we're selfish. The reality is everyone needs to have boundaries. And unless we set successful boundaries with ourselves, we are going to continue to struggle. So let's talk about these consequences of avoiding setting boundaries. The first consequence when you refuse to set boundaries is that you're going to deal with a lot of emotions. The reality is when we go to environments and we feel unsettled, that's our body's way of saying that we don't need to be there. Or when we're in unhealthy or toxic relationships and we feel that nudge that we need to leave, again, that's our body's way of protecting us and setting up that boundary. When we push against that boundary or try to push it aside and ignore it, we're going to deal with a lot of inconsistencies, and that's where the anxiety and the depression come into play. So without setting boundaries, you're setting yourself up to deal with a lot of mental health concerns, which ultimately are no good for anyone. The next consequence that could come if you avoid setting boundaries is being taken advantage of. Boundaries help people know how we like to be treated. And so if we're constantly saying yes to something that we mean no to, then we're going to get taken advantage of. Or if we are constantly in unhealthy relationships, but we stay there because we don't have healthy boundaries, then that's sending the intention that we're okay with the way we're being treated. When you set healthy boundaries, you set that precedence for what you're okay with being treated like, and therefore make sure that you are not in situations where you're constantly being taken advantage of or taken for granted. The third consequence of not setting boundaries is that your relationships will resemble that. Therefore, you'll end up in unhealthy and toxic relationships. When we don't teach people how to treat us with boundaries and such, it allows people to have the misconception that we are okay with toxic behavior or unhealthy patterns. But when you set those boundaries up, you set that expectation and that standard for what you will allow in your life. The process of setting boundaries can be overwhelming. It can be difficult. It can be hard. But don't let that confuse you. Just because it's overwhelming, difficult, or hard does not mean it's wrong. In fact, setting boundaries is the best thing that you can do for your mental health, your well-being, and most importantly, your peace. When you're working on setting those boundaries, the best thing that you can do for yourself is to sit still with your thoughts. Ask yourself, how do I feel around this person? How do I feel at this environment? How does this situation make me feel? There's a lot that we can learn from people, places, and things. But a lot of us like to quiet those thoughts because the idea of setting boundaries doesn't feel comfortable. It doesn't even feel familiar. It doesn't feel nice. But remember that setting boundaries is not about being nice or making other people comfortable. They're ultimately for our benefit. And if you want the peace that you deserve and desire, you must set boundaries. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. And until next time, I will chat with you guys later.